So, so Amazon is still sort of the lead player. Walmart is interesting that they're probably the only other player that is going to exist in the long run, at least in terms of sort of a platform where they have a marketplace. Anyone can go on there. Almost everyone who's on Amazon is by and large on Walmart. They have a pretty good selection. They have their own sort of warehouses, and they finally figured out, how to leverage the fact they have physical stores. And this was a huge challenge. It was like clearly where they always had to go, but it was a fascinating cultural challenge on how they were going to get there. Like I wrote about this a couple of weeks ago. They had to build up e-commerce on its own before they could merge it. Like there was the cultural and sort of logistical momentum of their existing business was too powerful to graph on e-commerce. They had to build, and it took them 20 years to figure this out. They had to finally say, okay, we're going to build e-commerce on the side. Once that could stand on its own, and COVID helped them because they had to force it together.
You touched on it in the interview with McMillan, but the way Walmart was able to use COVID as sort of a launch pad for this new way
COVID was incredible for Walmart. Yeah, like Walmart is arguably, you can make a case that Walmart, I'm just making this up right now, so I'm not sure if it's true, but that Walmart is the company that most benefited from COVID of basically any company in the world. So you had all these internet companies that obviously got a ton of new business, much of which kind of killed them, right? Like do you think about a company like Zoom? Zoom was so harmed by COVID precisely because they got so popular. And so they had two problems. Number one, they had a huge diversion of resources into just making the service function. But then number two, it alerted all their competitors to the importance of this category, and they got a way stronger competitive response than they would have in isolation. It would have been so much better for Zoom to keep growing slowly, and Microsoft would have woken up eventually, but it would have been way better for Microsoft to really wake up and say 2024, 2025, than to wake up in 2020. They would have had 5 years of building, and that building would have been actually building features instead of just trying to keep the service up. It might ultimately in the long run sort of ultimately kill the company. I mean, and it's a shame because Zoom is still, set aside the sort of the Chinese questions and all that sort of thing. It's the best functioning service. It still works better than anything else.
We still use it regularly, here at Stratechery. Well, and Walmart being the inverse of that story.
Walmart needed to shove its e-commerce and store stuff together. That was in the long run going to be their competitive advantage. Fortunately for them, in 2015 or so, they realized, okay, we can't build these together. We have to break out e-commerce and do it separate. So they bought Jet.com, they put Mark Allor in charge, they built out they really established their platform, and it became something that could stand on its own. And they always had the goal and vision. They had to have, because it wouldn't have made sense otherwise, that we need an omni-channel sort of experience where you can go online and you can get delivery, or you can do pickup, or you can go to this store, like this sort of combination. But to get there is hard. And COVID's like, okay, we might have had plans to put this stuff together. Now we have no choice but to put together. And by the way, there's not going to be any cultural pushback. You're not going to have people in the stores complaining about it. One of the most interesting things that Doug McMillan sort of explained to me is that this gets at why it's so hard for companies to move to adjacent categories. Walmart succeeded by federalism, right? Like they pushed a lot of power down to the stores. And so stores could really make decisions, and they would empower store managers to make decisions for their local. And the thing about Walmart is Walmart was rural in. They started in small towns, and even in sort of a lot of big cities, Walmart is maybe now that it's there, or it's on the outskirts or whatever it might be. It's always been a more rural than suburban sort of play. And store managers were empowered to manage their store in accordance with their sort of local sort of town and city.
Their own little fiefdom there.
That's right. Now, and it's funny because no one thinks about it this way, because everyone's perception of Walmart is them coming in and killing Main Street, right? And all these small towns. And there certainly was an aspect of that, but it's like everything's relative to like an internet company like Amazon, where it's one store for everyone. It was much more distributed and local. The problem is that e-commerce is, to the Amazon point, inherently centralized. The whole reason it works is because you get leverage off of your costs at scale. And so all the development needs to happen centralized. You have one website. You don't have a website per town or whatever, right? You of course you have logistics centers spread out, but those logistics centers need to operate as one so that they have maximum efficiency, so you can spend billions of dollars on building it out, but you get sort of leverage on those costs over time. And so their real cultural problem was having stores and a culture of decentralization running head on to e-commerce, which is centralized. And that's the cultural problem they had, and why they had to separate them in around 2015 so that e-commerce could grow up. You get to COVID and suddenly all those store managers and that entire culture is defunct. It just doesn't work. Yes, Walmarts are by and large allowed to stay open, but everyone's sort of,
they just have a bunch of inventory that they want to move. However,
you just have desperation
right?
to move it, to figure it out, and you have sort of a inspiration, like, I want to figure this out, like we are actually delivering necessary goods to people. And so it was this magical opportunity, to the extent anything in COVID could be characterized as magical, to do what needed to be done and to overcome all the cultural inertia that pushed against it because of the necessity of the moment. And so what they did is they are now this omni-channel sort of service. And they have their Prime sort of version, but it's not like what's the challenge with Amazon even still today? Sometimes you need stuff right now. Sometimes maybe you want to get groceries, the thing you buy the most, right? Amazon has yet to figure out the sort of, how do you do groceries online? Like, particularly fresh stuff. Stuff goes bad. Spoilage is sort of a huge cost.
No, look, and if you're a retailer, having groceries brings people back to your retail store every week. So it's a great business to be in if you've got.
It's why Amazon is still trying to figure it out.
People too.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing that helped them with COVID is it sort of retrained the way consumers experience Walmart, and people got more comfortable with curbside pickup for groceries.
Right, and they started thinking about Walmart as an e-commerce site, right?
They got comfortable with the omni-channel approach, which I mentioned on the last show is something my family uses all the time. And we live closer to a Target, so we use it with Target, but it actually does end up being really, really convenient relative to even Amazon, the greatest logistics business on earth. It takes a day or it takes 2 days for deliveries to get here.
Look at how spoiled we are. I can't believe it takes 24 hours. My goodness.
Well, it's so much easier when that turns into, it'll be ready in 2 hours. Just go run in and pick it up. And 90% of the U.S. population lives within 10 miles of a Walmart store, which is an unbelievable statistic, but it is a strategic asset that they're finally able to leverage now as they try to sort of blend these two businesses. So just an interesting story and the way it's evolved over the last several years here.
Yeah, it is quite interesting. And so because that is a durable asset. They have all those stores. They can do grocery in a way that Amazon has yet to figure out. So it's not just that they're large, and obviously they have a business that will make them be able to endure in a way like, say, a Jet.com could not, or another sort of Amazon competitor, but also they have legitimate differentiation and assets that Amazon does not. And, I don't know if Amazon's going to ever figure out physical retail, to be honest. Like, there's some aspect, Amazon is such a machine. There's so that, talk about that centralization and that wringing efficiency and maximal leverage from your investments. Amazon is such a machine in that regard. The moment you get physical, like, it just sort of like breaks apart. It's like this centrifuge that's spinning. If you introduce the smallest bit of vibration into that, the whole thing explodes. There's a bit about Amazon that just sort of seems to be the case. The other thing about Amazon is, I think you can make a case that Whole Foods was a mistake. And the reason it was a mistake is that was kind of their one shot to do an acquisition like that and be approved,
right.
and like not have it. And Whole Foods is
not
too
on
small.
Lena's watch.
It was too small. Well, no, just in general. I mean, I would oppose, a Amazon acquisition of a large other retailer
like
for
Kruger.
sure. Like,
Okay, sure.
yeah, and I think there's a potential issue. Like Whole Foods is too small. Like they didn't have enough penetration, enough locations for Amazon to really leverage it. It's not nothing. Obviously, it has a good brand, and there's lots of sort of assets that go with that. But yeah, I don't know if they're going to ever figure out the physical space. They're certainly going to keep trying because grocery is that big of a deal. Omnichannel is a real advantage for Walmart in particular. But yeah, that's why it's interesting. And Walmart, I was thrilled to interview Doug because like it is a tech story. And this bit, the most interesting thing was number one, that idea of building something up separately. You know, because I think that that was sort of the Clayton Christensen sort of prescription for how do you build something that is disruptive. You have to split it off a different organization and do that. And that was actually a manifestation of that. But also this centralization, decentralization bit. There's so many examples of it's very easy from the outside to say, oh, of course they should do that. Amazon has tons of logistics, or Walmart has tons of logistics. They have tons of warehouses. They have the satellite trucking fleet. Like they were the poster child for leveraging tech to do sort of distribution sort of back in the day. And to understand why it is that something that seems like an asset actually isn't is really interesting and gets at the degree to which the cost of scale is the loss of flexibility. And I think you see that with Amazon's struggles with physical e-commerce, and how Walmart did struggle with that, and how they overcame that is a very interesting story.
Yes, and the COVID aspect of